From Milwaukee. More specifically, from my doctor's office, because I have a case of Dick Tracewski. This is Kurt Berglund with another Pine Tar Baseball Great Team Set briefing. Today, the 1980 Kansas City Royals. A very, very interesting ball club. And not just for the reason that you're thinking of, and that would be George Brett. Today, I'm going to go over that team a little bit for you, introduce you to them, talk about how they fit in the set, and what challenges you'll have with them as you use them in a great team set season or tournament when the cards release very, very soon. First, let's talk about the team. They were 97-65 and won the American League West back when there were only two divisions. They were not seriously threatened during the course of the season. They swept the Yankees in 3 straight in the American League Championship Series. George Steinbrenner very famously storming out of Yankee Stadium to the delight of cameras. I believe it was ABC covering the game. And George Brett taking Goose Gossage to the upper deck in Yankee Stadium to cap Game 3. It wasn't... My enjoyment of that wasn't so much because the Royals won, although I can still remember Freddie Patek destroyed on the Royals bench after they lost the American League Championship Series again just a couple years before in '77. But it was the fact that the Yankees lost. And to my 15-year-old heart, it did that a lot of good. So I enjoyed this 80 Royals team and remember it fondly for that reason. Then they went on to the World Series and played against basically a 3 or 4 man 1980 Philadelphia Phillies team, and the rest were all sort of role players. Mike Schmidt was unbelievable, Steve Carlton was unbelievable, Tug McGraw was unbelievable. And that season, that was about it. And everybody else just sort of fit in, and Dallas Green had the right mojo, and they won. And it took them 6 games to do it, and to my horror, and the end of the Game 6, the Philadelphia Police Department came out with horses to encourage the Philadelphia fans to stay in the stands. That is etched in my mind. I don't know why. It just horrified me as a 15-year-old, and I remember it to this day. Anyway, enough about my psychological problems. The Royals had several good teams. This great team set spans 1964 to 1989. And I asked you to vote for the team that you wanted. The Royals were not in the top 5, although the 76 and the 77 and the 80 and the 85 teams all received votes. The 78 team, interestingly, did not receive more than 1 vote, which I thought was interesting because that was a fine team as well, and they had Al Hrabosky, who to me was just great. But I picked 1980 mostly because I was looking for something that would make it different from releases that Stratomatic and APBA had put together recently. And I knew that the George Brett card would be pretty amazing. And it is. So when we do our next poll, which will cover a half century between 1950 and 1999, to do another great team set, I'm spreading out the year range for the next poll. I would not be surprised if another Royal team lands in there. But this one is certainly a very, very good one and came very close to winning the World Series. Okay, so the big man, George Brett, one of the centerpieces of the entire set. His card is amazing. His stats go like this. He hit .390. In 1980, he was on base at a clip of .454. He slugged .664, which gave him an OPS of 1118. 1.118. George Brett was a monster in 1980. And he did all this in 117 games due to some injuries that he faced during that season. So he drove in 118 runs in 117 games in 1980. That's a monster. I think the overlooked part of the 1980 Royals is the strength of their starting rotation. Manager Jim Frey was at the helm in 1980, taking over from Whitey Herzog, who was blamed for the Royals' failure to repeat as Western Division champions in 1979. And Frey inherited Herzog's starting rotation. They were Larry Gura, 18-10 with a 2.95 earned run average. Dennis Leonard, 20-11 with a 3.75 earned run average. Paul Splittor, 14-11 with a 4.15 earned run average. And Rich Gale, 13-9 with a 3.92. That's a pretty deep rotation. Denny McLain isn't in that rotation, but it's pretty deep. It goes 4 men deep with quality. Let's look at the lineups for the Royals for 1980. Versus left-handed pitching, Willie Wilson in left field, UL Washington at short, George Brett at third, Hal McRae the DH, Amos Otis in center field, John Wathan the catcher, Willie Aikens at first base batting seventh, Jose Cardinal playing right field, batting eighth, and Frank White batting ninth at second. Versus right-handed pitching, Wilson in left, McRae the DH, Brett at third, Porter the catcher, Aikens at first, Amos Otis in center, Clint Hurdle in right, Frank White at second, and UL Washington at short. These two lineups, to me, scream start a lefty. Partly because you cannot control Brett with right-handed pitching. You probably can't control him either way. It minimizes Aikens' damage, and he was an important part of the offense. It gets Porter out of the lineup and brings John Wathan into the lineup, and gets Clint Hurdle out of there, and his right-handed hitting platoon partners during the year were not as good as he was. This is also the period of time before Clint Hurdle ate somebody that looked like Clint Hurdle. All right, let's talk about Dan Quisenberry. Dan Quisenberry was one of the major reasons this team was as good as it was. 75 games pitched, 128 1/3 innings pitched for 33 saves. The man was used a lot, and he could pitch a lot. Team numbers for this team, team statistics, go like this. 185 stolen bases, first in the league. 43 caught stealing. I didn't do the math, but that's a really good percentage. They stole a lot of bases, and they had to in that ballpark with that turf. They hit 59 triples. This is a team loaded with speed. You'll like that part of this team when you play them in this set. They were first in the league in triples. They were first in the league in stolen bases. Then comes the other stuff. They had 115 home runs. That was good for 9th in the league. They had a 286 team batting average. As a team, they hit almost 290. That was good for 1st in the league. And they had a 345 on base percentage as a team, which was good for 3rd in the league that season. Couple of other notes. They had 7 pitchers who pitched 89 or more innings. So if you're going to look at it differently, 7 pitchers pitched more than 88 innings. Everybody else was less than that. Jim Frey rode those starting pitchers, and Rennie Martin, and Dan Quisenberry, and Marty Patton really, really hard. The last 3 guys in the pitching staff did not pitch much at all. And so you're thinking about this team, you're thinking about a very select core group of pitchers who were used in games that the Royals were in close or were winning. Here's another example of that. For position players, only 11 position players played more than 70 games. 11 players played more than 70 games. That's it. So he took his starting 9 with a couple of subs, Wathan being one of them, and rode them very, very hard. So we're talking really about, yes, it was a 25-man team, of course, but we're talking about 7 pitchers and 11 position players doing the vast, vast, vast majority of the work. If you were on the bench for Jim Frey, you could sit there a very long time. That's interesting and important because it's going to limit the substituting that you're going to want to be able to do with this team. So that's something to think about as you prepare to use this team in the Great Team set. Now, for cost purposes and just because 27 people make sense, in this set, teams will get 27 players per team. So you'll have the bodies. They just weren't used by Jim Frey during that season. It was very much an effort of 18 people. I think that's interesting and it's telling because we're not talking about a team from 1916. We're talking about a 1980 Kansas City Royal team. And I think that's interesting. So, Brett is awesome. Avoid right-handed pitching. When you use them, be ready for not much of a bench. But that front line was good. And they can run. And they will for this team. Hope you found this interesting and informative. Please click ttlbaseballgame.com for more information about Pine Tar Baseball. The set's coming soon, I promise. And please click like and subscribe to my channel. My name's Kurt Berglund. I hope you have a good day. So long, everybody.